Welcome to the Free and Open Mind VCast. I'm Hardy Brooklyn.
And I'm Michelle Wild.
Who are you?
And what is your true passion?
I want to give a shout out before we start to Martin with Flow Juggle, who's been generous enough to help us make this happen and get us moving on the way, and Linda from ROIResumes.com, who's also been instrumental in helping us move this forward. Make sure to check out Martin's cool videos at the end of our show. Today, we're going to talk about asking for help and getting help. But before we do that, I just wanted to do a quick recap with Miss Michelle about what we've talked about over the past couple of episodes.
We've been discussing boundaries, how to implement your boundaries, consent.
So let's just give a sentence about boundaries. Like, one of the things that I really want to remind people and get people to realize is that during these times of pandemic, you have a lot of new situations that you're putting yourself in. And it's really important to learn and to define and use those boundaries in the spaces, because if you don't use them now, it might be too late before you get to use them.
Yeah, agreed. And we talked about consent.
And again, the same thing. This is a new time. Like, you're given a new opportunity. You're at home, you're sequestered, you're quarantined, or you're going back out into the world. Start using your consent. Give people permission to come close to you without a mask, or not. Like, you have those rights. You can walk away.
Right. Yeah, and to give your consent and your boundaries in the most loving, kind way as possible, not in an angry way. Right.
Make sure you be positive.
Right. So this episode we're talking about seeking help. And not the kind of help, like psychological help, but more help and like helping you facilitate the changes in your life. And
that's because a lot of people here, like, they have a passion, they have a belief, and they want to change something. And it's really hard to make a lot of changes in your life on your own.
Yeah.
Especially when you have to change other people's perceptions at the same time. So the clients that I've been interviewing, working with, parts of the study groups that I've been, and people that I've encountered all along, one of the things that I really realize is that there is always a time to ask for help.
Yes. And it's not a sign of weakness to ask for help.
No, it's not.
No.
It's a sign of strength, because it realizes it's one of the things that you are weaker at, but you have a weakness, you have a hole, you have something that you're not good at. Everybody's not amazing at everything.
Right. Well, I think weakness is a bad word. It's just, you just don't know that, right?
You don't know, you need advice, you need somebody to vent it, you need somebody to bounce it off of.
Right, so it could be two different things. One, you need help in actually, if you want to be a photographer, and how do I actually learn those skills to become a photographer? And then you need help because you need help facilitating an actual change, right? So it's two different kind of things.
Correct. So we're talking about asking for help from either, let's say, like a coach, a psychologist, a therapist, somebody that is in a mentoring program,
right?
Somebody that is in a guidance counselor role or a guidance counselor position, or even sometimes an HR person. But I just always foment that when I say the HR person is never your friend. They're always there to defend and protect the company. They're not there to do anything for you. So if you're reaching out to them, just be aware that that's the situation.
And also asking for guidance and help from somebody that's already gone through a change, and like how they did it and what were their steps, and how do they facilitate pursuing their passion.
So how do we do that? How do you get your nerve up to ask that question? And like, when clients come to me, they'll come to me and they're like, we go through the whole interview, I really could use your services. And I'm like, well, these are the programs that I offer, and this is what it costs. And I'm like, well, if you don't have money, these are some other options you can have. You can join these particular groups and organizations and other things like that. But how do you fundamentally make the decision that this is something that I need to A, pay for, or B, commit to? Because a lot of times, even if you're not paying a life coach or a business coach or a therapist or a psychiatrist, a lot of times if somebody's working with you, that's still an expense.
Yeah.
Because you're not doing other things. You pretty much have to be nice to them, and you're still committing your time.
Right. So you could barter for stuff. People do a lot of bartering, right? They could help you with something, and you can help them with something.
Okay, so
but maybe they need help with admin stuff.
And that's great, except I feel that when I've worked with clients or I've gone through the sales cycle with clients, they never have trouble cutting the check. They have trouble consistently showing up and doing the homework, because that commitment costs more to them than the money for the sessions.
So their time is worth more than their money.
Correct. Or they're
well,
overbooked,
the
or
truth of the matter is, if you really, really want something, then you're going to commit to it. So if you're not committing to it, then maybe you really don't want it. Do you know what I mean?
Yep.
Okay. So who are some of the places that you can go to ask for help besides a life coach, like somebody like you?
Besides life coaches, you can go to any of the universities, any colleges. They have great community outreach programs. I know that all the SUNYs and CUNYs do if you're in the New York area. Most of them are very cheap. Most of the hospital chains now have gobbled up a lot of the private clinics, so that you don't really have, in New York at least, a lot of those clinics that used to be mom and pop clinics are now part of Northwell Health or Columbia Presbyterian, and they still offer the same services at the same rates. It's just a little bit more paperwork, and you're still as anonymous as you possibly can be. But there are also, depending on where you live, lots and lots of organizations. For the GLBT community, you just basically Google it. There's a lot of them out there, and I don't want to give credit to others unless I've really sat down and gone through them. But I do recommend Googling and trying out one or two or three of them, because one's going to fit you better, whether it's a group program or whether it's one-on-one coaching, whether it's one-on-one counseling, whether it's you're meeting in a classroom setting. There's all those different options are out there, as well as Facebook, Google, all of these other places. There are tons of things that you can find out. There's meetups for all kinds of support groups.
Yep. So also, I like to say, if there's somebody you admire or somebody's work you really love, that you can contact them. And not necessarily get mentored by them if they don't have the time, but ask them, hey, listen, I'm starting out as, again, an example is a photographer, and I really love your work. How did you become a photographer?
Right.
You know what I mean? Like, get the steps that they took.
And that's great for asking help for a static change, but I think that you really need to look at either developing a long-term relationship with someone if you're going through mental issues and psychological issues. And a lot of that is acceptance is considered one of those.
Okay.
So if you're having trouble getting accepted, or if you're having trouble accepting other people's response to you, that's when you're going to reach out to the coaches, the therapists, the counselors, the community workers, things like that, the community organizations that are going to really provide the support that you're lacking and that you really need to be truly happy.
So if you don't have a lot of money to go see a therapist, there's lots of therapists that have to do a certain amount of hours, right, to get their degree. So you can find a place that has a very discounted therapy session.
And we live in New York City, and there's lots of community organizations. Like, I have a friend that her health insurance doesn't cover therapy. She doesn't make enough money to go to a therapist. She needs therapy. So she went to the systems and applied.
Right.
And she now has, she's going to be constantly evaluated by a medical doctor and a therapist, but she now has all of that provided to her through this community organization.
Right. So it's like if they're helping you and you're helping them.
Right.
So it's a good thing.
So what does it look like to get a mentor in life, or get somebody that's going to kind of help you, or that you're going to either learn what to do or what not to do?
Right. That's a very good point. So one of the things I wanted to bring up is that when I went to school for photography, I had to take 2 internships. One was a full-time one was a part-time one. And the full-time one was working for a photographer. I had been working for him for a very long time. And instead of actually, doing more hours for him, I just had to write like a 10-page paper about working for him. And it was broken down like in 5 different scenarios, psychologically, monetarily, all that stuff. And so, he was a really cranky, very angry, person, and anybody that worked for him and all the people that I dealt with for him did not like him. And so it was really difficult when I first sat down, what was I going to actually write? What did I actually learn? And then I realized that what I learned was not how not to be. You know what I mean? I learned how to run a business through him, but I also learned about that public relations and business relationships was really, really important, and that you really need to be nice and kind to somebody, because, if they printed it wrong, they didn't do it intentionally. It just, they just didn't print it the way you wanted. It's going to be printed again. So, if you're nice to somebody and approach them better in a nice way, then you're going to get more, right?
Yep.
So just to know that, if you end up getting a mentor, or if you end up, working for somebody part-time, and you realize it's, not really working out, figure out why it's not working out. Why isn't it working out for you? And that's another lesson in and itself.
And that's great, and I do think that that's the biggest, most important thing, is that when you're making the selection process, when you're working with your counselor, therapist, or mentor, it's a constant, ongoing life process. I mean, when I reached out and I started seeing a therapist, I think I went through, in the first 2 years, six different therapists, and every single one was a different reason why it didn't work out.
Right.
And then I finally got one, and I worked with her to work through my issues.
Right.
And that's what led me to becoming a coach. And now seeing it from the coaching side, it's really interesting, because I coach other coaches as well. And I also participate in coaching groups, so that we can practice coaching, practice technique, talk about what worked at your clients, what didn't work at your clients. And what I find really interesting is it's always the same thing. It's always the client is afraid to ask for help. Or if they do, they're asking for the help, but they're not committing fully to it. So they'll come into a session, whether it's with a therapist, and they'll be like, all right, I'm going to do this thing when I go home. And the thing might be that every time I recognize that I'm creating anger in my body, I'm acknowledging it. And then we'll come back and we'll talk next week, and we'll be like, well, how did that go? Well, I did it a little bit, but then
Okay, so this is a good point. This is a good self-discovery. Why is it that you can't come through? You know what I mean? Because if you're actually going to follow through in your passion, and you're going to do something, and a lot of times it's going to be something that you're going to work on your own, you're going to have to push yourself.
Right.
So, if you can't push yourself now, why, you're not going to be able to do down the road. So you really need to evaluate and figure out why you're doing that. Why are you half-assing it? If you really, truly want it, you can't half-ass it.
And every step of the way, you need to make an evaluation.
Right.
Because I see people so many times, what they do is they start something, and then that person makes every other excuse in the book. So when he was asked in the group, why did you not follow through? That's literally just a self-reflection. Nobody even needs to know you're doing it. You don't have to change your habits. You don't have to change anything. And his answer was, because it made me feel icky.
Okay.
But
then again, you have to sit and figure out, why is it making you feel icky?
Right.
Right?
And that's
it's one thing to recognize it, but it's another thing to figure it out and then change that behavior.
So then basically the group said, we're going to do a sample coaching session for you and see if we can work through it. And I wasn't the one that was doing the questioning, but within 15 minutes, everybody on that screen, not only did we know and understand from the way he was answering the questions, but we got the person that was questioning him, got him to actually speak those words himself.
Right.
Because it made me feel the same way when in high school.
Okay.
And that was, I would have never gone that route. Maybe the person knew him a little more and he wasn't an American, so maybe they knew about their lifestyle a little more. But whatever it was. But, having somebody else help you ask those questions really helps you get to the real root of it.
Right.
When you're trying to do it yourself, you might not. And he was like, wow, I really never thought it was that. I thought it was this other reason, and it made me not really care. And then when he found out what it really was, now he really cares and wants to fix it.
Right. So the thing is, too, but it doesn't stop you from feeling that yuckiness. What it does, it makes you stop and think once it does happen, I don't really need to feel this way, and then just kind of push yourself through it.
And not only push yourself through it, but understand how you can prevent that from happening. So when you put yourself in the situation, maybe what you're changing is your belief around the situation. Maybe what you're changing is, why are you thinking that way? Why is that happening to you?
Right.
And for this particular individual, it was actually just thinking and changing that. It was like, listen, this is the past. This is now. This is the future. That past is so long ago. And what happened, frankly, that never really should have went more than 6 months. Like, deal with it, get over it, move on. But because his core family, just like my family was, and a lot of people's families back in the olden days, were so adamant against going to therapy, getting a counselor, doing all of these things. So, and that's why it's really important, because there are people that are 30, 40, 50 years old that like really should go out and get a therapist or a counselor.
Right. Totally agree.
So what are some of the things that you think people should try to be kind of aware consciously of when they need to start thinking about reaching out and asking for help and getting help?
So getting help to get themselves together, or getting help to help them find their passion, or actually to pursue their passion?
I think it should be to help them find their passion and understand what it's going to take to accomplish that passion.
Well, I mean, the first thing, I did personally, like, if you want to be a musician, I'll give a good example, and there's a local band that you see that you absolutely love, and you've watched them since day one, since they got up on stage, just talking to them, emailing them or talking to them after stage, hey, I think you're really great, I'd like to become a musician too, do you have any good advice? What steps did you take, or what steps do you suggest to me? Because you never know what they're going to say. They could say, hey, listen, we need somebody, we need an assistant.
Right.
Why don't you help us out, right?
So that's one great thing to look at, is anybody that's already in the career or already in the genre that you think is coming from where you're coming from, but really you're going to need to ask them.
Yeah.
Because what I've learned being in and out of the music industry for 30 plus years, and being in and out of other different types of entertainment, is that everybody brings their own story to the table, and everybody's story is a created story.
Yeah.
So most of the people, when you hear where they came from and all the things and steps along the way, a lot of times those are created by publicists. So don't look at those stories all the time to be the dream that you're going to come. Oh, this guy went from riches to this. What happened to the 6 million years in between?
Yeah, there is no such thing as overnight success.
Right, or the 100 shows that they went to and they performed at.
And then only one person showed up.
Right. So whether it's that, or whether it's, hey, you want to become the next, lawnmower man, think about what ramifications that's going to have on your life, and think about what kind of support you're going to need to all of those ramifications. Your income's going to change. Your lifestyle's going to change. The hours that you're awake are going to change. And it's really important to look at all of these things and then make sure that you put in place a support network to support you.
Right.
And that's not showing you're weak. That's showing you're smart and you're strong.
Right, that you don't know something, right?
And that you need support, because we live in a country that every man for himself. I mean, radical self-reliance. That's one of the Burning Man principles.
Right.
Radical self-reliance, which means the only person you should rely on is yourself, because everybody else has different agendas. I shoot another video cast Wednesday nights, and this week we had a bunch of guests that were supposed to show up. One was a porn star who's fairly famous. He supposedly confirmed and was committed. There was another person that was somewhere in the type of, I don't know, something to do with fetish scene and sessions and not having sex, not kissing, but doing a lot of hugging and stuff like that. So there's a bunch of other people, and then there was another dom that was supposed to come that I don't know what she did, actually. I don't know she's just nasty. So we had a crew of 6 people that were supposed to show up. And when we got to the show, I got there, and there's only 2 of us there. And these people all had confirmed.
I think honestly, in the end, that they're doing you a favor, because you realize they're not part of your journey.
Correct. So that's a very important fact. But what I ended up doing was, with the other host, was having a conversation with him on coaching him how to better not be like. As soon as the porn star said he wasn't coming, he was just like shut down.
Right.
So it was working with him so that when you have those setbacks, you have to work through it. Like, that's not part of your journey. That's not part of your song.
Right.
That's not part of how you're going to get to where you're going to go.
Right. And don't take it personally.
Right.
I mean, that's what it ended up. He probably took it personally, right?
Right.
And you can't take it personally.
And then we ended up talking to other people that were around the studio space, and we had some really good discussions about, and this one really interested me, is look at the comedy space and all the people that try to become comedians. And then look at what happens to the comedians that do things wrong. And then look at the ones that how they get blacklisted or they get part of the cancel culture.
Right.
And then look at the ones that quickly rebound. The difference between the ones that get the cancel culture and get canceled out and the ones that get the cancel culture and are back the next day, the biggest difference is what they're doing, is the quality and the consistency of the product. So there are some comedians that have had very questionable activities, but they've bounced back really fast because they're putting out amazing product with amazing regularity. And then you have the same comedians that are supposedly better or bigger names, and they have a scandal, and 3-4 years go by, and they're still struggling to make their next big break.
I also think it has a lot to do with having like balls and chutzpah, like that just keep on going through.
But they're doing it like if they mentioned 2 people, and I'm not going to mention their names, but they mentioned 2 specific comedians, and it's interesting because the one that's not succeeding is putting way more money, way more effort into trying to come back.
Okay.
And because his quality is not at the same level as the other person, he's not doing it.
Right. I think but it's a combination of things. It's quality, it's being persistent, it's keep on, even though you've been pushed back 2 steps, you just keep on coming. You get up in the morning, you keep on doing it. I mean, that's part of having something that you're passionate about, right?
Yeah.
Is that no matter what, I'm going to make it. Whatever level I'm going to make it, I'm going to be a professional photographer. That's what I'm going to do.
And that's also where you're going to work with your mentor, your coach, your counselor, your therapist, your consultant, because those people are going to give you feedback.
And goals, and realistic goals of how you're going to actually achieve that, and then and also give you the question of ultimately what is it that you what kind of photographer do you want to be? Do you want to be really famous? Do you want to make a lot of money? Do you want to shoot X, Y, and Z? So what's your end goal actually is too, right?
And in this particular situation, one comedian listened to his consultant, his friends, his peers. The other one is just trying to push through. He's not creating better new content.
Right.
He's doing the same old pattern that he had as he did before. So when you get those advisors, listen to them, because it could mean life or death. It can be between $1,000 and $1 million.
Right. Don't be stubborn.
And let yourself realize that it's okay to get a coach. It's okay to get a consultant. It's okay to have a therapist. It's okay to have a psychiatrist.
Yeah, or a mentor and all that stuff. Every single one. I needed it too. Every single one of us has done that. Even the person that you're asking to mentor you, they had a mentor also. Right.
I mean, when I was growing up, I had a business partner who was mentoring me, and I learned a lot of things from him. A lot of things I learned from him were what not to do, and a lot of things were what to do. But a lot of those not to do things weren't that he was doing things wrong. It was that he was doing things differently than I would like to do them, or he was doing things from the time and space when he grew up and learned them, where this is now it's almost 40 years later.
Right. It's really, really important to know exactly what you don't want as much as you do as you want.
Right. And listen to those people and take into account and follow through. So next week we're probably going to go back to talking a little bit more about boundaries, just because we have a lot of activities that are going to come up that are going to be putting you back into the mainstream world.
Yes.
And there's a lot of stuff that's probably going to be changing in the world by next week. So that I think that boundaries are going to be really important. I'm constantly doing that on my Kiki Dating Week monthly thing, where it's basically every week we're talking about boundaries, and every month we're talking about boundaries and consent. And with what's happening in the world today, I think we really want to revisit that, and we'll probably have another little special topic that we'll add on top of that. But I think that the core of it is going to be on how to set boundaries, not necessarily in the sex world or the fetish world, but in day-to-day life.
Yeah. All right, so we want to shout out to Flo, what is this?
Flow Juggle.
Flow Juggle, yay. And?
ROI Resumes.
I'm Michelle Wild.
I'm Hardy Brooklyn.
This is a free and open mind podcast.
Where, who are you?
And what is your true passion?
Thank you.